Imagine a vast, silent palace. A world built of marble, gold, and power. A man sits at its center, not as a king, but as a prisoner of his own making. His fortune is immeasurable, his name is a legend, and his life is a monument to loneliness. His phone never rings with a friendly voice, only the cold, transactional beeps of business. His grand dining table seats 20, yet he eats alone, the clink of his silver spoon echoing in the cavernous silence. He is a billionaire, surrounded by everything money can buy, and yet he has nothing that truly matters.
This is a story about that man.
A story about the devastating cost of a life lived without love. And it is a story about the most unlikely of visitors, a child who knew nothing of wealth or status, who saw only a lonely soul in need of a friend. Hi everyone, my name is Neha, and welcome to the channel. The place where stories are not just told, they stay with you and quietly change the way you think. If you love meaningful stories with powerful life lessons, then you are in the right place. Now sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story about how a single, innocent moment can shatter the walls we build around our hearts. Arthur Sterling was a titan of industry. He had built an empire from nothing, a self-made man whose name was synonymous with success and, some whispered, ruthlessness. His business acumen was legendary, but it came at a terrible price. He had sacrificed his family on the altar of his ambition. His children, now scattered across the globe, spoke to him only through their lawyers. His ex-wife, a woman he had once loved, had long since moved on, having found a life filled with the laughter and warmth that Arthur's world of spreadsheets and boardroom battles could never provide. Now, at the age of 72, a degenerative illness had confined him to a luxurious but sterile existence in his sprawling estate. The once sharp mind was now often clouded, and the powerful frame was reduced to a frail shadow. He was a man who had conquered the world, only to be conquered by his own body and his own solitude. He was a fortress, but his walls were his cage. The staff in his mansion was efficient, professional, and utterly silent. They moved through the halls like ghosts, their eyes averted, their voices hushed. They were paid well to be invisible, to cater to every whim, and to never, ever disturb the master. For Arthur, their presence was a constant reminder of what he lacked: genuine human connection. They were paid companions, not friends. They were there out of a contract, not out of love. Among the staff was Alara, a quiet, hard-working maid. A single mother who had fled a difficult past to build a new life for her and her daughter, Lily. Alara was a ghost in her own right, her movements silent, her presence barely noticed. She took her job seriously, not just for the money, but because it gave her and Lily a sense of stability. A small, modest room in the servants' quarters was their sanctuary, a world away from the opulence and sadness that filled the rest of the house. Her only rule was simple: do not bring Lily to the main house. It was a line that was not to be crossed, a separation of worlds that was kept absolute. But children, as we know, do not understand boundaries. One afternoon, while Alara was lost in the meticulous polishing of a priceless antique, Lily, who was only 3, wandered away from their small room. She was a curious little thing, with big, expressive eyes and a gap-toothed smile that could melt the iciest of hearts. She toddled through the maze of hallways, her little footsteps a soft patter against the polished marble floors. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was just exploring. She ended up at a pair of grand, heavy oak doors. They were slightly ajar. Peeking inside, she saw a man in a large, wingback chair, looking out at the garden. He seemed old and very, very sad. To Lily, he wasn't a legendary billionaire. He wasn't the formidable Arthur Sterling. He was just a lonely man. Bored of her exploration, she padded softly over to his side. Arthur, sensing a presence, turned his head. His eyes, clouded with age and fatigue, landed on the tiny figure. He was about to call for the butler to have this intruder removed when she did something that stopped him cold. She raised her small, chubby hand and, with the simple, uncomplicated empathy of a child, gently patted his knee. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice soft as a flower petal. "Don't be sad." The words hung in the air, shattering the silence that had been the only music in Arthur's life for years. This small, powerless creature was the first person to see him. Not the billionaire. Not the tycoon. Just a man. A man who was sad. Arthur was stunned. It was the first kind touch he had received in years. Not the formal, clinical touch of a nurse, but a touch of pure, unadulterated human warmth. He looked at her, his eyes now wide with a mixture of shock and a deep, aching vulnerability. "And what is your name?" he asked, his voice a rusty whisper. "Lily," she said, and then, as if inviting him to play, she patted the empty space on the floor next to him. "You come down." With a Herculean effort and more than a little grumbling, Arthur Sterling, the man who had commanded armies of employees, lowered himself from his chair to the floor. It was an act of profound humility. For the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't sitting above everyone else. He was sitting with someone. For the next hour, the great Arthur Sterling played on the floor of his grand sitting room. He built towers of blocks, and Lily, with a gentle but firm hand, knocked them down. He drew pictures of animals, and she pointed out all the colors he'd missed. It was a ridiculous, undignified, and utterly beautiful scene. The billionaire laughed for the first time in a decade when Lily tried to fix his drawing of a dog by scribbling a blue eye over it. When Alara finally found them, her face was white with terror. She expected a furious, enraged master. Instead, she found the two of them, sitting side by side, Lily's small hand resting in Arthur's large, wrinkled one, as she pointed at a picture book. "I was wondering when you'd get here, Alara," Arthur said, his voice soft. "Lily was just showing me how to color in the lines. I've never been very good at it." He looked at Alara, and his gaze was different. It was no longer cold and commanding, but warm and appreciative. "You have a remarkable daughter," he said simply, "and I don't want you to worry about a thing." From that day, everything changed. Lily became a daily visitor. Her sweet, giggling presence filled the once empty mansion with a sound more precious than any acquisition Arthur had ever made. He would ask the cooks to prepare her favorite treats, and he'd get down on the floor, forgetting the pain in his joints, just to be at her level. He'd teach her about birds and flowers, and she'd teach him how to be silly again. The other staff were initially shocked, then quietly moved. The man who never smiled now beamed whenever Lily came into the room. The man who never spoke was now telling stories to a wide-eyed toddler. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. In Lily, Arthur found something his billions could never buy: unconditional love. She didn't want his money. She didn't want his power. She just wanted him to be her friend. And in Arthur, Lily found a grandfather figure who adored her, a warm presence who made her feel safe and cherished. Arthur, on his deathbed a few months later, was no longer the lonely billionaire. He was surrounded by Alara and Lily. The room was filled with the scent of Lily's favorite flowers, which he'd had delivered to the house. His final act was to sign a new will, one that left a substantial trust fund for Lily's education and a generous sum for Alara. But the true legacy of his new will wasn't money. His final gift to Lily was something far more precious. In a letter he left for her, he wrote, "My dearest Lily, you showed me that a life without love is no life at all. You taught me that the greatest fortune isn't the one you can count, but the one you can feel. My only regret is that I learned this lesson so late. Thank you for coming into my life, for being the tiny spark that lit up my world. You were my greatest teacher." And that, my friends, is the story of Arthur and Lily. A story that reminds us that the greatest wealth isn't money, power, or possessions. It is the love we give, the kindness we share, and the connections we build. A toddler, who had nothing to offer but her heart, gave a dying man more than any billionaire could have ever dreamed of. We spend so much of our lives chasing success, building empires, and accumulating things, that we often forget the only thing that truly matters: the people we share our lives with. Arthur's story is a powerful warning. He was a king in his castle, but he was also a pauper in his heart. It took a child, a symbol of innocence and purity, to remind him of his own humanity. So, here's the question for you today. What are you building your life upon? Are you building a fortune? Or are you building a family? Are you chasing the approval of the world, or the love of those who matter most? Take a moment. Call a loved one. Spend time with a child. Show kindness to a stranger. Because in the end, the only legacy that truly matters is the one you leave in the hearts of the people who love you. This is Neha, signing off. Thank you for letting me tell you this story. Remember, the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest ripples of change. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread a little more love in this world. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me about a person like Lily who has changed your life with their simple kindness. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.